Did Donald Trump make the biggest strategic mistake of his presidency? When the United States launched strikes inside Iran, the message from Washington was clear. This was supposed to be a quick operation, a short war, a decisive show of strength. But just days later, the reality on the ground looked very different. Missiles raining across the Middle East, global oil markets trembling, and the world's most powerful military suddenly facing a question it did not expect. What if this war doesn't end quickly? Behind the headlines lies a deeper strategy and a deeper mistake. Tonight, we investigate 5 critical questions that could determine the future of this conflict. The Middle East is once again on fire. American and Israeli strikes have targeted military and infrastructure sites inside Tehran. At the same time, Iran has launched waves of ballistic missiles toward regional targets. Airspace across the region has been disrupted. Embassies have closed, and thousands of civilians remain trapped with no clear evacuation path. For many analysts, the most shocking moment came when the United States issued a warning to its own citizens in the region. The message was blunt: leave immediately, but you may have to do it on your own. That statement alone revealed something unexpected. The United States may have entered the war quickly, but it may not have fully prepared for the consequences. To understand why this conflict has become so complicated, we need to look at Iran's military doctrine. For years, Iran has built a strategy known as asymmetric warfare. Instead of relying on a centralized command system, Iranian military structures are distributed across multiple units. Think of it like a mosaic defense network. If leadership is eliminated, the system continues functioning independently. And that is exactly what appears to be happening now. Even after key leaders were killed, Iranian missile units continued operating. There is no single command center to negotiate with. No single leader who can simply call for a ceasefire. In other words, the very strategy designed to survive invasion may now be prolonging the war. Question 1. What is America's objective? At the start of the conflict, Washington gave a clear explanation. The goal was to destroy Iran's nuclear program. But within days, the message began changing. One statement suggested the goal was regime change. Another said the mission was to degrade missile capabilities. Then another explanation appeared: prevent Iran from threatening its neighbors. And finally, a different justification emerged entirely. The strikes were necessary because an Iranian attack was supposedly imminent. For critics inside the United States, this shifting explanation has raised serious concerns. If the objective keeps changing, what exactly is the strategy? Without a clear goal, even the strongest military campaign can become dangerously unpredictable. Question 2. Did Israel drag America into war? Another controversial claim has begun circulating in Washington. Some analysts believe the United States entered the conflict partly because Israel was preparing to strike Iran anyway. The logic was simple. If Israel attacked first, Iran would likely retaliate against American assets in the region. So Washington decided to strike first. But this reasoning has sparked an intense political debate. Critics argue that it effectively means American forces entered a war to protect an ally's decision rather than a direct threat to the United States itself. And that debate is now dividing politicians across the American political spectrum. Question 3. Did the U.S. military prepared? Before the war began, the United States deployed massive resources. Aircraft carriers, advanced fighter jets, missile defense systems. But early reports suggest the conflict may be consuming those resources faster than expected.
One of the biggest challenges is missile defense. Iran has launched large numbers of ballistic missiles. To intercept each missile, the United States must fire expensive interceptor systems such as Patriot missiles. And here is the problem. Interceptors are far more expensive than the missiles they destroy. If Iran continues firing at high volume, the conflict becomes a war of attrition. In a war of attrition, victory doesn't depend on who strikes hardest. It depends on who runs out of weapons first.
Question 4. The Saudi factor. Then another mystery appeared. A major oil facility in Saudi Arabia was attacked. Initial reports blamed Iran, but later intelligence suggested something unexpected. Iran may not have carried out the attack. That raises a disturbing possibility. Could another actor be attempting to pull Saudi Arabia deeper into the conflict? If Riyadh officially joins the war, the regional balance would change dramatically, and suddenly a limited conflict could become a full Middle East war. Question 5. The global economic shock. Perhaps the biggest global consequence lies in a narrow strip of water known as the Strait of Hormuz. This passage controls roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. Iran has threatened to block the strait. If that happens, the economic impact could be enormous. Oil prices have already surged. Analysts warn prices could reach $120 to $150 per barrel. That would trigger inflation across the world. Higher food prices, higher transportation costs, weaker currencies. In short, a regional war could quickly become a global economic crisis. So what is the strategic trap? At this point, the conflict has entered a dangerous phase. For the United States, escalation carries enormous costs, but withdrawing quickly could appear as a strategic defeat. Iran, meanwhile, has little incentive to surrender quickly. After suffering massive strikes, Iranian leadership may believe continuing the fight strengthens its political position. And because its military strategy is decentralized, even if Washington wanted to negotiate a ceasefire tomorrow, there may be no single authority left to negotiate with. That is the strategic trap. What is the implications? How this war could end? There are only a few possible outcomes. Option 1. The United States launches an overwhelming air campaign to destroy Iran's military infrastructure completely. But that could take months and cost billions. Option 2. Diplomatic pressure forces both sides toward a negotiated settlement. But negotiations require leadership structures that may no longer exist. Option 3. The war slowly transforms into a prolonged regional conflict, similar to Iraq or Afghanistan, a conflict with no quick victory and no clear ending. In closing, history has shown something important about wars in the Middle East. They rarely end the way leaders expect. What begins as a limited strike can become a long and unpredictable conflict. And today, the world is watching one critical question unfold. Was this war a calculated strategy, or the opening move of a crisis no one can control anymore?